In the trades, your PPE is sometimes all that stands between you and a life-altering injury.
If you have to use my stuff for what I built it for, it's arguably the worst day of your working life.
With over 25 years of experience in protective clothing, Derek Singh breaks down how mistakes happen and why building a culture of accountability, not enforcement, means everyone goes home safe.
We want to fit in. We don't want to be the odd guy out. Where the leadership is dialed in, everybody else is dialed in because they're going to emulate what they see.
This is the WorkReady podcast. At the end of the day, it's not just about getting through another shift. It's about having enough left in the tank for your family and building a career that lasts. That's why we created the WorkReady podcast. If that's the kind of life you're working towards, subscribe and walk this journey with us. Every episode is one more step towards retiring strong, not broken. Hello and welcome to the WorkReady podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Kevin Rindal, and today I'm joined by Derek Singh, a leading voice in the world of flame-resistant protection and safety education. Derek's helped thousands understand not just what to wear, but why it matters. I'd love to hear a little bit more about who Derek Singh is and walk us through your athletic career and what brought you into the world of FR gear.
I think first and foremost, athletics teach you grit, teach you determination, teach you resilience. And there's a natural bond to folks who do that professionally. And when you look at the folks that power our world, and that's who we protect those that power our world. You look where our shirts, pants, and coveralls go into as PPE, it's in oil and gas, it's in refineries, and our subject matter here today specifically are line workers, our utility workers, those that keep the lights on. So you look at the folks that are successful in that space, they have a common foundation. And I think it's easy to see grit, resilience, adaptability, be able to think on the run, to have a general idea, a playbook, so to speak. And I think we all have those. And when we go out into the environment, I think all those things that make athletes successful also make those that power our world successful. So there's a natural connectivity there, I think. I know you've seen me present a couple times, and I definitely relay that athletic background as kind of a connection tool, even though that my kids are more than happy to remind me, Dad, that was 100 years ago, and I try to tell them it was only 35. But if you look at it in the context, if you were looking 35 years in the past of when I played in the late 80s, early 90s, you'd be going back to leather helmets and no face masks. So I use part of that evolution when we talk about PPE, especially in the football environment. You look at all the things that we've learned and how things have evolved. From shoulder pads to helmets to cleats to surfaces, all those things that we've learned about. What's the connection? Unfortunately, we've learned about those by giving people lifelong injuries or having to deal with stuff well long after they've retired. And the parallel is you look at our retired line workers from 10, 15, 20 years ago, and you can see the limps, you can see the aches, you can see the elbows that don't work so good, the shoulders that aren't as flexible, and that directly correlates to, especially my peers, when we sit there and talk about how the aches and pains are every morning when we roll out of bed, and it takes us a little bit longer to warm up every morning. That's our line community of the same time period. So when you and I delve into what can we do better today, well, we understand ergonomics. We understand the limitations of the human body. We develop better equipment to do things easier, to protect us better, so that when we do get to the end, and actually while we're nowhere near as banged up as we used to be. So I do see a lot of promise. I do see a lot of things that have changed. I look at where you folks are and bringing into that, just the whole musculoskeletal approach to longevity. I mean, here we are. We ask these guys to get up on, the crack of dawn in the middle of a storm, throw a whole bunch of PPE on, climb into a fall harness, and work 30 feet up in the air when the wind is howling and all that stuff. And then you wonder why that they don't feel great 5-10 years down the road. So how can we mitigate that? We've talked about extending careers. One of the things that we touched on, I mean, investing in your people now, if what it takes to get to someone to be a journeyman lineman, all the skills, all the investment, everything. And if you could extend that career 5 years by better nutrition, better understanding of their musculoskeletal system, utilizing all their PPE, lighter, more efficient PPE so it's not as strenuous. If I can get 5 more years out of every single line worker with all the needs that we're going to have in the next 15 to 20 years, wouldn't that be beneficial? So you take an extra 10 minutes to warm up every morning. You put an extra X amount of hours in the week to take care of themselves, to hydrate, to do all the things necessary. It can't be anything but beneficial. So I think there's a lot of parallels in what we talk about, and some of it may be, I don't know, outside of what people would normally stereotypically think what those boundaries are, going, why is there a PPE FR guy talking about longevity and talking about, muscle skeletal stuff? Because it all adds up. I mean, I talk about, my 20 plus concussions, and people are always shocked because we didn't have concussion protocol back in my days. It was smelling salts and get your butt back on the field. That was your concussion protocol. If you got to play off to get your head right, and coach said, how many fingers? And you always said 2, because he told you, I'm always going to hold up 2 fingers. So just say 2. That was concussion protocol. Could you imagine, here we are 35 years later, could you imagine trying to get that past the medical staff? No, you wouldn't even think about it.
So give us the details on your playing career. You played for San Diego State. Tell us a little bit more about your position.
Sure.
Yeah.
Folks always think, and it's a nice compliment, you're a tight end. Well, yeah, I'm 235 pounds now today, which probably is not even a pro tight end weight. But believe it or not, I was a 300-pound offensive guard back in the day, pulling around the corner, trying to find targets in the middle of the field. Doing all those things that you see on Saturdays and Sundays, getting in people's way and trying to stop other angry human beings from getting to their success, which was either knocking down my running back or taking out my quarterback. So yeah, that was pretty much it from the time in high school all the way through till it finally ended. Unfortunately, I had a career-ending injury, and it didn't catch up to me till I got my tryout, but it did limit my capabilities at my tryout. I ended up having a career-ending neck injury back in the day. So yeah, that was 10-year investment, like a lot of folks, and kind of gone. Took me down a different path. So yeah, somehow I ended up in this very niche, very cool little place in the PPE world. That when folks ask, well, how do I get to do what you do? And there is no roadmap. I went through and never worked a day in my career. I walked into the counselor's office and go, what is the fastest degree I can get and get out of here? And the goal at that time was then got into sales, ended up migrating into arguably the top uniform supply company and renter of work apparel in the U.S. I did that for just a little over a decade, kind of got my foundation there. And then someone introduced me to this FR piece way back in ancient times. I mean, where we are today to compare it to 25 years ago when I started, we had about 5 fabrics in my day. You had the 2 FR cottons, 100% and 8812. You had an import from Europe, Carmel. You had DuPont's Nomex, which dominated the market. And then you had this stuff called PBI Kevlar, which you don't see in garments anymore today. Where you see that primarily is the outer shell or firefighter turnout gear. So those were the 5 things we had to play with. We worked in oil and gas, and we worked in the steel mill. That was it. I mean, if you remember back to watching Rudy and all those guys running around when he was working for his dad and his brother in the steel mill, and they had all those green kind of shirt jacket things on, That was the secondary market, and then the primary market was our oil. It was our oil refineries. Other than that, no one really used FR. And it wasn't until 2000 when NFPA 7E said for our folks working on energized electrical equipment, you need to be in FR clothing, because that was the term at the time. 2012, that term changed to AR, arc-rated clothing. And then it wasn't until 2014, it wasn't mandated into our line workers until 2014, to where the final rule went through some revisions. FR was going to be a big piece of that. And then it finally came down in 2014, April 1st of all dates. Okay, that's April Fool's Day. They announced that the outermost layer of your garments working in and around energized equipment, you had to have your correct PPE on. So we've just been a decade plus now in our utility workers where it's been mandated. There was hybrid forms before that. The biggest thing, obviously, you're allowed to wear was cotton, no meltables. That makes absolute common sense. The downside with cotton is it will insulate up until it ignites. Once it ignites, it's going to contribute to injury. So it was a really weird concept back in '94 when they wrote that before they changed it. So the hybrids we had were cotton jeans and lightweight, and at that time the most common was FR rayon shirts. Okay, at least they would self-extinguish. They weren't protecting you to the incident energies, because we didn't even talk about incident energies back there, but making sure we put ourselves out was good. Unfortunately, in the lower half, you're wearing fuel. So along with a lot of research back in the 2000s with ComEd, kind of started it off up at Kema Labs doing the very, very first live arc flash testing visually with dummies mannequins in buckets, mannequins in underground vaults, mannequins up against equipment. Westex at that time took over and did a whole bunch of low voltage, quote unquote, stuff. That continued now with our folks at Tyndale. Scott Margolin and his team still do a ton of work out there helping educate our electrical workforce against the hazards, because people knew of folks that were getting in arc flash hazards. I mean, there's probably, on average, you can look at 3,500 or so arc flashes every year. You can say about 600, less than 1,000 that cause injury. The fatalities at that time were pretty high, probably, 100 plus. We've got that way down. We're still having arc flashes. We're still getting people hurt, but the fatalities are way down because the PPE is better. Back in those days, you were catching fire. One of the common misunderstandings or misinterpretations is people think you wear my stuff, flame-resistant arc-rated clothing, to protect against arc flashes, because that's the hazard. Well, that's not the hazard. That's just the ignition source. In a fire, you need three things: oxygen, ignition, and fuel. Well, we have tons of oxygen, thankfully. We have this huge ignition source, and then we had people wearing fuel. And at that time, the fuel was cotton. So what the hazard is catching fire and continue to burn, because that's ultimately what causes catastrophic body burn, which leads to a whole bunch of complications in the burn unit, which ultimately leads to potentially fatal. So you have an ignition source that can cause a fatality by you wearing fuel, which is the other piece of the triangle. So we have oxygen in the air, we have a big ignition source, and then here I come wandering into to the ignition source wearing a big cotton blanket. You're basically a candle wick. That's what causes massive body burn, and that's what ultimately leads to potential fatality. Take the fuel out of the equation, you no longer have a fire. So by self-extinguishing at its core, you now have a protective equipment, personal protective equipment that I wear into that potential ignition. I don't catch fire. I mitigate those injuries. Little or no chance of fatality from body burn. Now, there are some extenuating circumstances. There are some strange things that can happen. Vaporized copper can get in our lungs. Vaporized copper can get in our eyes. There's lots of other injuries that can happen. But the vast majority of all fatalities from arc flash were clothing ignition, aka body burn situations. So if I can mitigate that, if I can virtually eliminate that, if I can take third degree down to second, second down to first, first down to none, if I can take 60% body burn down to 15% body burn, you can see how my chances of survivability are going to dramatically increase. And ultimately, at the end of the day, that's the simples of why you wear this stuff and how it works and how it kind of got into where we are today.
As a safety leader, you have more risks to cover than hours in the day. That's where Vimosity comes in. We give you one platform to scale your impact, delivering expert curated safety campaigns on everything from slip, trips, and falls to heat stress and soft tissue injury prevention. You'll reach every crew through the channels that they already use, while gaining data insights to guide smarter prevention. With Vimosity, you can boost awareness, prevent serious incidents, and keep your workforce ready for the job. Scan the QR code or visit Vimosity.com to learn how leading utilities are cutting injuries by 50%.
That was the part that really stood out to me when I heard you present for the first time. For some reason, I didn't put two and two together of the fuel source being the clothing was the main reason from a protection standpoint. You didn't want that fire to continue to burn when someone was exposed to an arc flash. You go all around the country speaking on this. When you speak to groups, especially linemen or people in the electrical trades, do you think that people understand the full picture and the reason why behind wearing the proper PPE when it comes to working in those high hazard environments? Or is that something that you feel like even when you go and give those presentations, it's new information for some of the people?
I would say 99.9% of it's all review. It's all refresh. We're not taking anything dramatically new that their internal folks, their own safety folks, their supervisors, the people that now understand and are protecting them on a day-to-day basis aren't already saying. But how I talk to when I go, well, why should we have you, Derek? We talk about arc flash PPE all the time. My correlation or my oversimplification is how many times did your dad tell you not to do something and you did it? But your coach told you, and all of a sudden you came back and go, well, why are you doing that? Well, coach told me. Well, I've been telling you that for 2 years. When you get, square up over the plate, swing the bat this way, straighten out, and you refuse to do it. But here comes in this third party that all of a sudden has a little bit of cachet because they stand on a stage and they're elevated, and all of a sudden there's a little bit more and they go, I never knew that. Or, yeah, you know that because they've been telling you to button up your FR and they've been telling you to roll down your sleeves ever since you got the stuff, but somehow hearing it from a stage, from a third party, has a little bit more emphasis. So it's a way of complementing the message. We're not striking new ground most of the time, but it's just another voice. And when you can impart that message in a completely different way. Here's a prime example. I talk to folks all the time, and when I talk to my utility workers, I go, you're some of the brightest and smartest that we have. To be able to think on the fly, do math on the fly, do algebra on the fly, and figure out everything else and where to safely put your bucket truck and everything, and look at erosion and test poles and the 90 things that you have to do just in order to get 30 feet up in the air. You're some of the smartest people that we have. Secondly, in order to do your job, arguably the most important tools you have are this one and this thing. Look at the fantastic engineering that is in this piece of equipment. Now, let me ask you, how much skin do you have to sacrifice before you're into muscle and bone? I go, because once you're into muscle and bone, for our triage folks, for our folks that work at our burn centers, if you come in with 4th and 5th degree burns, which are muscle and bone, they're the easiest for them to triage. They simply mark it for removal. So if you don't have a lot of depth before you're into muscle and bone, how long before this tool is no longer capable of doing what you need it to do? So that's when we correlate that into your arc flash clothing, your rubbers, your leathers, your hard hat, your safety glasses, your hearing protection. all these things matter because at the end of the day, they're preserving your ability to do what you've been trained to do. And rubber gloves with leather protectors are very insulative because they have to be closest and many times to that arcing fault. Well, if I'm telling you that arcing fault is 5 calories at my chest, what is it when I'm hands-on? It's a heck of a lot more. But we haven't calculated for hands-on, but thankfully these rubbers and leathers are up to 50 plus calories before they start registering any kind of damage that could potentially correlate to that hand. But imagine putting that hand in there unprotected. I mean, when we take that rubber and leather ensemble and we take it under our arm and we slide our hand out because we don't have the dexterity to do our job for that, oh, I'm only going to do it for a couple seconds. That's what we want folks thinking about. I had an incident very, very similar. We had a pad mount transformer. We were working on it. We were in our arc-rated clothing. In fact, the gentleman that got in this incident had just gone through our training. He had his arc-rated shirt was tucked in. It was buttoned up, sleeves rolled down, rubbers and leathers in the equipment. But guess what? There was no overhead hazard. It was outside. It was a sunny day. Guess where his hard hat was? In the cab of his truck. Guess what he had on his head? Your ball cap. He ended up in a burn unit with 3rd-degree burns from his melted ball cap. Imagine spending all that money across all those wears and making that one simple mistake. And that's some of the stuff that we talk about that people don't directly think about when the flame-resistant arc-rated clothing guy comes in to talk. We talk about the ball cap on the head. We talk about the hoodie that we're wearing under our approved, it's in our catalog, very expensive 40 cal brown duck coat on a cold day. Well, what's that hoodie that's sitting on the back of our head? Did we just grab it off the back of the door? Is it something that is not part of the program, but it's a little bit more insulation today because it's a tad colder than it was yesterday? Well, on the surface, that doesn't sound like it's a huge deal. I got this very, very protective coat. Well, first and foremost, that hood is on the outer layer. It's on the outside, needs to be flame-resistant arc-rated. Secondly, what do we do or what are we taught to do or when we think about cold stress that we don't talk as much about as we do heat stress, but on a cold day, what's the one thing we don't want to do? We don't want to sweat. So when it goes from minus 20 to plus 10 in the afternoon, what are we taking off? That very protective outermost layer. Now, do we remember that hoodie underneath is non-FR? It's just like simple things like those little nuggets that we want them to take away. So back to your original question, why do folks that talk about this stuff on the regular, why do journeyman linemen who have been, on the job for 5+ years and are very well entrenched in all their safety stuff, why do they need to listen to some third-party folks? It's the taking away of those tiny little nuggets that we have learned from other folks that do their job where they made that one little mistake that resulted in unnecessary injury that could potentially shortcut or cut short that 25, 30-year career to where now they're having to be retrained, to where now they had built a lifestyle around their income level as a 10-year journeyman lineman, and now they're going to have to be retrained on something that's not going to compensate them anywhere near that level, and all that ripple effect as you go on. So if we can get someone just to take a step back and just think about something, or hesitate when they go to remove some PPE because it's cumbersome or happens to be in the way, or it's too hot today or too cold today, whatever the mitigating factor is that they're going to communicate to their safety person on why they did something unsafe, let's stop that process so that conversation never needs to happen because they thought twice. So long-winded way again of saying what we talk about or what I talk about necessarily does focus and does talk about that, but you're actually talking about much broader things. You're actually talking about something a little bit wider and a little bit deeper because everything that you're saying correlates to all the other PPE that they need to interact with on a day-to-day basis. whether it's making sure your gas monitor is calibrated, whether it's making sure that your fall harness, that all your straps have no rips, frays, and tears, because we bring that up. And we talk about taking care of your PPE and taking care of your flame-resistant arc-rated clothing. I tell people all the time, do you allow rips, tears, frays on your fall harness? Do you allow your fall harness to have a faulty D-ring? Absolutely not. But we allow rips, tears, frays, holes, buttons missing, snaps missing, Velcro missing on our flame-resistant arc-rated clothing, and don't give it a second thought. So I'm not asking them to, to treat this stuff like it's, like it's crystal and they have to be ultra safe. But I'm saying, give it a second thought. When you've got 2-3 holes in a garment, get it replaced. When you've got a big rip, get a new shirt. So again, trying to make those parallels outside of shirts, pants, and coveralls and where it connects with them, and try to go from there.
And so many great recommendations there. As you're going through that, I just kept thinking of like an airplane pilot. You have so much going on in your head before you go out there and do this critical task. What is an easy checklist that someone can go through in their mind to just make sure that they have all the boxes checked? Because like you said, oftentimes it's just one of those things, I need to throw on an extra sweatshirt. Yep. And you just don't think about that. Or I just need to take off my gloves so I have a little more dexterity for 20 seconds, but it could be that 20 seconds that, bad things happen. So what is something that somebody can do from a personal accountability standpoint to just have that checklist?
Easiest thing to do with our stuff before you put it on, just don't overcomplicate it. It's a simple scan. Scan the front, scan the back. Check that you've got all your buttons. So integrity, are there rips and holes? Secondly, fasteners. Are all my buttons, Velcro, and things intact? And then fit. Believe it or not, we don't want it tight because air gap is a great insulator. We don't want it super loose that it's a hang-up hazard too. But that there's a sweet spot in between. So as you get bigger or garments get smaller, make sure that they're fitting comfortably. Again, with what you're required to do on a day-to-day basis, no one wants to be fighting their shirts and pants. That leads to fatigue and other things. So make sure they fit correctly, make sure all your fasteners are in shape, and make sure the integrity of the garment is able to, so that you can tuck, button, and roll and secure, and you're good to go.
How do you create a culture of accountability that doesn't feel like somebody's constantly looking at you trying to enforce rules, but instead holding each other accountable? So I'm just thinking of like a foreman or even a safety professional, when they see somebody who's maybe not wearing PPE, like AR clothing properly, how can they create a culture where there's that personal accountability so that they don't feel like they have to be policemen?
That's a great question. One, I don't think I have the gray matter, depth, and width to give you a full answer to that, because I remember back when I was learning this stuff from Darren Llewellyn, who was Llewellyn Technologies. He was my kind of mentor in this, and he told me a couple things. He goes, one, the hardest thing to coach on, the hardest thing to get is culture. You can't put it in a box. You can't deliver to somebody. It is the single hardest thing to do. So to answer your question, I'm a big believer in setting the example. And this usually resonates to when you first came out of whatever academy you're in, whatever training academy, whether it's fire, whether it's police, whether it's a military branch, or if you're coming out of a line school, you've been told by your instructors, this is how you're to show up. So you show up day one and you're suited and booted. You got your brand new Red Wing leather boots on. You've got your arc-rated denim. You're tucked, you're buttoned, the appropriate belt. You are a poster child. And you walk into the line room and they're unbuttoned, untucked, laying back, hard thing. How many days do you think it's going to take you before you look just like them? Because the number one thing for human beings is what? We want to fit in. We don't want to be the odd guy out. So flip that. If you walked into a squad room, if you walked into a firehouse, if you walked into your barracks coming out of OCS or wherever, and everybody was booted and suited and singing from the same piece of music, you're going to fit right in and everybody's tight. So that tells me that as a supervisor, as a foreman, as anybody who has a lead position, whether it's by title and or tenure, look the part, and all those young people, all those new people to you, everybody will look the part, because all I got to do is look at how my leader looks, and guess who I want to emulate. There's very few organizations that I've seen or that I've been part of where leadership is dialed in that I have to worry about how everybody else is dialed in, because they're going to emulate what they see. And so does the opposite. When you see unsafe habits and when you see people just saying to themselves, oh, we only put it on when we need it. Good luck with that in an arc flash. I mean, that's like saying I only clicked my safety belt right before the accident. Okay? The safety belt analogy to me, I probably used since I first got into this role, because it's the most logical for my very, very simple brain. I'm going to click my safety belt from the time I was 15 to the time I'm 75 and off the highways 100, 200, 300, 500,000 times. How many times am I going to use it for what it was built for? Hopefully none. But I'm definitely not going to be able to just to snap it right before I identify, here comes the hazard. So the correlation is I wear my flame resistant arc rated clothing exactly the same way every time to what? Maximize its performance, mitigate my injuries, because in the off chance that there is an arcing fault, I've done everything I can do to make sure that I get home to my family, number one. Secondly, that I still have a role in the career that I have built, with no intent to ever have to use it. So again, I want you wearing it, but never having to use it for what I built it for. I tell people all the time, I build life-saving pieces of equipment that just happen to look like shirts, pants, and coveralls. And if you have to use my stuff for what I built it for, it's arguably the worst day of your working life, because what I built it for is to save your life in that extreme thermal event. Now, that being said, the only way it can maximize and do all those things is I have to be suited and booted as if it was going to happen, and trust that we're doing everything to make sure that it doesn't happen. Just like driving in that car, I am doing everything. I have the latest technology. I have everything else going for me. My defensive driving, I'm scanning. I'm not distracted. My phone's turned off. I'm doing everything to make sure that I can get to my destination safely. But there's always that X factor, that there's that unknown. There is that car that careens and spins out of control, jumps the divide, and literally lands right in front of us, and there's nothing I can do. Well, that safety belt now is saving my life, even though I've done everything else correctly. There's always that X factor. And that's what we wear it for lots of times. We don't wear it for knowingly going into an accident or knowingly going into a thermal event. That's what firefighters do. Firefighter turnout gear is built for knowingly going into a thermal event. They don't wear that turnout gear back at the station. They're kicking back until that klaxon goes off. There's no PPE involved. Now the klaxon goes off, they're donning it, and they're out the door, and they're going into a thermal event. In our industrial world, and especially in our utility world, we don't knowingly go into thermal events. Believe it or not, arc flashes aren't supposed to happen. They're accidental. So unless you can predict accidents, it's very, very unlikely that you can put it on when you need it, that you'll button it up when you go up into those energized lines. And we know that they don't, because we have all these statistics and we have all the injury data to show that you don't. The one cool thing about thermal energy is it's easy for forensic folks after the fact to tell you what you weren't doing. If you were literally burned from your elbow to the top of your gloves, you can't tell me you had your sleeves rolled down. If you've got second-degree burns and a big V shape on your chest, you can't sit there and tell me you had your arc-rated shirt buttoned all the way up. So to my point is again, We want to make sure that we're doing everything right because these are unpredictable.
One of the things that I appreciate about your communication style is uh, communicating the bigger why. So if I'm a foreman on a crew and I want to move from enforcement to encouraging others to take personal responsibility, why is communicating the bigger why of wearing your PPE properly so important?
Well, again, the goal, I think, on any safety program is to get me home the same way I came to work that day. Good, bad, or indifferent. Everybody comes to work as a mechanism to provide for what their bigger why is. I mean, it might be their family, it might be their kids, it might be their grandkids, it may be getting so and so through college, it may be getting, the wife through culinary school. It may be a lot of different things, but it's going to be different for everybody. But it's definitely, I'm not doing this at the end of the day to ultimately have something that is career ending or possibly worse, life ending. So when we look at why, and when we look at all the protocols that we have, and we can argue whether they're overcorrective or whether we shift in a certain direction, getting that a lot of that is noise. What's the goal? The goal is for my organization to do everything possible to get me home the same way I came. And then it's my responsibility to do everything within there to maximize what tools I've been given and what guidance I've been given in order to do that. So I do think there's been a shift, and I know that you've seen this as we look at the next wave, the next generation, the next nuance. Work is a tool in order to accomplish whatever the lifestyle I want to have is. It's a mechanism to provide the funds in order to do that. So I want to be able to ride my ATV on the weekend. I want to be able to go see the kids. I want to go hunt. I want to go fish. I want to, be able to be a playwright. Whatever you may want to do, I don't want anything in my day-to-day to impact my ability to do that. So I see a shift in consciousness towards the PPE, but you've hit it on. I have to know the why, especially with the new generation coming. Back in the old days, it was wear this. Because if I did this presentation 10 years ago, I would have had people walking up and going, that's the first time I've ever heard anybody explain why I need this stuff. I don't get that anymore. What I get is, thank you. That was never heard it that way before. That was great. That really connected with me. I understand a little bit more, but I don't have the, hey, I was just handed this and told to wear it. So you're seeing that shift. And I think we're responding as a safety platform, especially when I see the next generation of safety folks coming in to deliver the message. The message is in and around the why. It is in and around what the greater is, because it's not just this. This is what you do to do the job. Well, okay, that doesn't correlate with our 25 to 30-year-olds today. I mean, it barely correlated with the 30 to 35s. They just kind of tolerated it. But in today's world, you really, really, and this is where I see my safety communicators, those that are in the management roles, that are in the director roles and that, and I really see them shifting, because the tonality of a safety meeting today, when you get introduced in front of the team to talk about it, it's always about, hey, remember, we're bringing these people in, we're bringing in these subject matter experts so that you can better understand what we do and how important you are to us at the end of the day, so you can go on for whatever your why is at the end of the week.
Right now, we have like 3 generations in the workforce. And as you mentioned, the most experienced generation, they were some of that, just rub dirt on it, just get out there, work. We don't talk about our feelings. And then you've got, the 18 to 24-year-olds coming out who have just been raised in a totally different environment, in a social media based world where everything is instantaneous and it's short form. What are some of the things that you have found effective for communicating and kind of bridging the gap between those three generations?
That's a really broad question in the sense of how do we, as folks that are in my demographic, communicate to folks that are in your demographic, who then have to cascade it down into the next demographic. The toughest thing is, and I think we're bridging the gap in a lot of what we're doing here right now today, in podcasts, in shorts, in LinkedIn, in Instagram. I'm seeing a lot of quote unquote influencers who are still hands-on in the trades, disseminating a lot of that information now into that 15, 30 second, no more than a minute format, so it can be consumed and so it can be understood. I do think there is obviously a lot of value in those extended contacts in front of folks. But the hardest thing is for folks like myself who have had, believe it or not, 61 trips around the sun now. How do I package my message that's going to be 45 minutes to an hour, in some cases 90 minutes, to where we can keep that attention and keep those talking points relevant? And that's why I think it's so key for presenters and instructors and trainers to stay as relevant to their audience as possible. You know, in my particular case, and this may not be the best answer for your question, is trying not to have death by PowerPoint, trying to have, you know, enough variety of media within there to where someone gets a nugget. I don't think there's any perfect format. I think it's very, very difficult and challenging to take that, you know, that veteran who has seen everything onto his safety and or superintendent who may be a generation below him, but he chose to take a leadership path where our veteran never wanted to be in management. So we have those two, and then we have just, you know, I just got my journeyman ticket. I'm coming out, and I'm still, as the old saying says, wet behind the ears, and I'm just happy to be here, and I'm all, just tell me what to do. I'm ready to go, and bring all those together. And that's why it's not easy. I mean, anybody that thinks that there's a boilerplate solution to safety and or communication, that's why I think it's necessary to bring other voices in. How you communicate, how your colleagues communicate, how I choose to communicate is different than my peers and those that are doing very, very similar. I look at the folks in our space, the Jason Brosens, the Brandon Schraders, who are bringing their message because they actually had an incident, got hurt, survived, and have a tale to tell. Well, there's that piece, and then there's a quarter century of me being in it, and it's that piece. And I think it takes all formats. And the hardest thing, of course, that you hit into it is how do I create that team dynamic? The first and foremost thing as a dad and as a grandpa, as dad, is I go, get that handheld device out of the crew room. Get that handheld device out of, you know, if we're traveling somewhere, these things are locked up and we're talking. And we're talking about the job, and we're talking about the challenges, and we're talking about the last job and what we need to bring to this job. The worst thing we can do, in my opinion, is allow that little black device that we can hold in our hands to be the primary teacher. The toughest thing, and I go, you've seen the numbers, we are losing 3 to 1 right now. For every 3 that are retiring, all that knowledge base that is leaving our utilities, we're replacing with 1 right now. The staggering numbers I just heard is we have globally, we have 10,000 data centers. And I know up where you are, data centers are a big thing, right? We're going to need 100,000 data centers just to deal with all the AI and all the other requirements that we're going to have. Well, who's laying the foundation? Who's putting up the frame? Who's dropping in the plumbing? Who's wiring it? And then who's maintaining it? And who's educating on all this stuff? And who's going to bring all those resources? Where are they all coming from? because it's great that you want to do all these things. And I tell you, robots ain't going to be close to doing it. Not where we're putting these things in remote, isolated areas. And then how are we going to power them all? Well, there's folks now talking about these micro reactors. We can pop those in all the remote places on the planet, and we can run 10 data centers side by side. Okay, that sounds great. Then they're talking about the water needs on that. How are you going to plumb it? Where are you going to get all the water? How are you going to get all the AC to work in this place to keep all that stuff cool? So you start looking at that chain reaction. If A, then B, then C, by the time we're down to having a fraction of what we need, how many electricians is that? How many plumbers is that? How many concrete foundation builders are there? So, I mean, I had, as silly as it sounds, I had 3 of my friends whose kids are a little younger than me. They're like juniors, freshmen, sophomore, juniors in high school. I go, put them into trades tomorrow. I mean, the second that they have a chance to get into a trade school, their university degree is always going to be there. You can go get that at 40. You can go get that at 45 if you need to check that box. But between 18 to 22, get yourself a trade. From 25 to 35, go make 6 figures minimum a year. You've got no student debt. You've got a house. You've got all, that is the revitalization of the American dream. It's literally sitting right in front of us because the trades we're retiring out more than we're bringing in, and robots, yeah, you can have a robot welder in a manufacturing facility, but you can't have him off-site 200 miles away from X, Y, and Z. That's got to be an actual hands-on, welder.
Well, you're spot on, though. I mean, everyone talks about AI taking jobs, but when we look at the trades and the needs to support AI, I mean, that's one of the greatest opportunities, I think, for this next generation coming up. So definitely, I'm very well aligned with you. We've got to be pushing the next generation into the trades. So Derek, you get asked to speak all the time. I mean, you're on the road. It seems like every time you and I connect, you're heading somewhere. When you get those invitations, what are those companies or organizations wanting? What's their pain point for why they're bringing you in to speak to their crews or to their company? What are the problems that you're helping them solve?
I think it dovetails or circles back into having an alternate voice. I do think I do have the advantage that folks want to train on this particular hazard every couple to 3 years. So there's a lot of folks now 15 years into this with Bulwark. I get a lot of folks that, hey, keep coming back. I'm on that 3 to 5 year rotation. And then a lot of it is folks who have heard me at conferences want to get that message into their team. I think everybody is anxious to learn. Everybody's anxious to hear it from a different perspective. Everybody's looking we have 12 safety meetings a year. I mean, we have 7,000 utilities, give or take, across the nation. That's a lot of spots where folks would like to hear someone else bring some information, whether it's the fall safety guy, whether it's the boot guy, whether it is whoever it is. There's lots of opportunities in our space to get that message out. And as long as you're bringing the message I tell folks all the time, I have a strong bias. I would love to see as many triangles in the field as I can, but at the end of the day, get good stuff, take care of it, wear it right, and it'll take care of you on that unfortunate day. At the end of the day, there's a lot of good companies in our space doing a lot of things right that are going to protect folks if things go wrong. And I've got no problem sharing that. When we first started this role and when I was first given the ability to implement my vision, because when I came on, I was a regular business development, up and down the coast sales guy. And my goal was to sell as many units as possible. And I happened to have a supervisor, boss at the time, said, well, what's your vision? And I go, well, I'm a coach at heart. You know, like they said, if you can't make it, teach it. So I didn't ultimately make it, so I love teaching it. And with that said, I had a vision of raising the tide so that all boats rise. And I think that servant kind of leadership mentality that's talked a lot about in our space today when it comes to folks who are giving of themselves when they're, I mean, and you talk about it, it's out on the road. I mean, I've got 36 events already confirmed for 2026. I went through this year with 52 and something. I've got colleagues that have a lot more than that. And when you are giving of your time and you're taking that away from wherever you call home, there's a certain amount of sacrifice is a strong word. I think people like to use that, but there fundamentally is, if it's in the truest sense, you are giving up something in order to do something else. You have choices. I could be doing something completely different than this, but I choose to do this, regardless if it is X amount of flights a year and 80 plus nights in a hotel and all those things to get the message out. Because I think our goal is when we see the devastation that these events can have, even if it's just injury, even if it's just I'm down for 6 months and I'm slowly coming back, it's the hours and hours that the family spends at the ICU. And been unfortunate enough to have spent 12 days in ICU. I know for me, those 12 days flew by. My wife and kids and my friends had 24-hour vigils at my bedside and in that hospital while I drifted in and out of 13 different operations. You look at folks that go through that ripple effect that it has on the family, friends. Every person that's affected is a brother, sister, son, daughter, aunt, uncle, nephew, whatever the case may be. Anytime that you've ever seen, whether it's firefighters, whether it's police officers, utility workers, anytime any of them are injured, you see that gathering, and there's no room for anybody to sit. There's literally hundreds of bodies going in and out there because Joe's hurt. And that camaraderie, that family, that sense, and having it disrupted by something that could be mitigated or something that could have been changed, I think that's what drives all safety folks. At the end of the day, they don't want to be that safety guy in that waiting room. And I think when they put their heads down at night, they want to know that they've done everything possible so that that doesn't happen. And when they look to the field and they look at subject matter experts that can bring and echo that message, because when you boil it down, what I'm talking about and why I'm talking about it is, at the end of the day, it's get you home safe, mitigate any potential injuries. And God forbid if the worst thing happens, we've done everything that we can so that at the end of the day, I know I did everything within my ability to mitigate that. And I think that's what I don't want to say haunts, but I think that's what sits underneath the surface of every safety professional, everybody that's involved in PPE, everybody that's doing things from the big picture is I don't want that to happen to anybody. I don't want any parents to have to worry about their sons and daughters. I don't want any wives and kids to worry about mom and dad and significant others and all that ripple effect. I want that to be as mitigated as possible. And I think that's what drives me to be on the road all those days, to be in those hotels away from my wife, kids, and my 8 grandchildren. I think that's what keeps me on the road.
Derek, if we're to go down one layer deeper, what is your driving purpose in your life, and what has been the thing that has guided you over the course of your life?
I think I've hit on a lot of it. And I know you said get a little bit deeper, but as I think about what we've said up to this point, and I think again, what connected you and I together is I think we saw some parallels there in whatever your greater calling is, whatever that voice inside you that drives that spirit to put yourself out there and be a voice, be a voice in a space that makes a difference. I think however you want to look at your score sheet, however you want to look at your tallies, when everything is said and done, when you hang up your shield, you hang up your armor, and you walk off that field, whether it's your helmet, your shoulder pads, whether it's your duty belt, whether it's your climbing gear, your fall harness, no matter what your role is or where and what you went to, I think at the end of the day, you just want the tally sheet to be a positive. People talk about legacies all the time. I don't know what that means. I don't really have an understanding of what that is, but I just like to think that intrinsically you've made a difference. I think that walking with purpose, engaging with purpose, I don't know what else I could do other than actually be hands on the ground in a much more forward-facing serving role, whether that's fire, whether that's police, whether that's military. I'm kind of that 2 or 3 levels down, but I think I have the same mindset. I think I have the same heart and goal is to have something that was greater than me, something that was bigger than me. How can I magnify what I have intelligence-wise, what I have knowledge-wise, put that with the same grit and ambition and everything that dragged me, off the high school fields in a small school up in Burnaby, British Columbia, to where I was sitting in, starting every game in a D1 college, which I didn't realize was that big a deal. I mean, it wasn't until much later, and took a lot of other people to explain to me, going, at that time there was 103 Division I schools. There was only 515 starting offensive linemen in the hall, and you're one of them. And I didn't see the world that way. I didn't realize what that was. That was just I came down here with a goal and an ambition, and I was going to work as hard as I could to make that happen, and I was fortunate enough that it did. So with all that, how do I take that drive and then that ambition and go into a workplace and not give back and not be thankful for everything that I've had? I mean, I look at this marketplace and I look at my line workers and I look at those that power our world, and I look just how much they've given my family by me being able to help me help you in a very, very small way. And I look at how much they've allowed me to have, my family's allowed to have, the roof over my head. And I kind of think of all those things. And again, I don't know if I'm answering your question. I don't know if it's deep enough. But yeah, at the end of the day, I'm very, very grateful. And that just keeps driving me.
Yeah, a consistent theme that I hear when I ask that question is thankfulness and gratitude being at the heart of who that person is and part of their purpose. And it definitely gives you a different lens on how you approach life. So well said. Derek, are there any final thoughts that you want to leave with the audience?
Again, just echoing what you said there, grateful for the platform. It's a nice little boost in to be able to be recognized and see what you've been doing and what you're creating, that I was included to be one of those folks that could continue to move your message and move this platform forward. I'm excited to see where it's going to be in 2 to 3 years. So I'm just glad to have been part of it, and I'm glad to have earned the kind of recognition from you that I'd be one of your first picks. So thank you for that.
Yeah, Derek, I just have so appreciated getting to know you. And like I said, your passion for serving other people and delivering really, really important messages to people in a way that I think changes their approach and how they view these things. It gives them that courage to, follow the system and follow the rules because of the bigger purpose to keep themselves safe and healthy. And you do such a good job of that. How can people find you, and what are maybe some things that if people have questions, how can they leverage you as a resource?
Easiest way, probably right now, unless we're flashing up emails and things that, find me on LinkedIn. Derek Sang, pretty easy to find. Bulwark, pretty easy to find. Reach out to me that way. I'll definitely connect and get you my email. Bulwark.com, that's an easy way too. So if you're in this business, you know who Bulwark.com is, you know who Bulwark FR is, you can find us that way. And definitely, if you're so inclined, LinkedIn's the easiest way.
Derek, thanks so much for your time. We're all better for it. And thank you for helping to keep the workforce work ready. And until next time, this is the WorkReady podcast. I'm Dr. Kevin Rindal, and we'll see you next time. Thank you so much.